Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 24th of May 2023, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Great to see you. On tonight's show, we find out more about Node Red with Kyle, AA0Z, live from America. We find out how the VHF contest station went on the weekend. And we also find out what on earth this is and whether I'm richer or poorer. Lovely to see you. We start with club news, and as I mentioned at the beginning, our VHF contest station, which has only really been in the planning for 8 weeks, came together at the weekend, and I think it read really well. I think everybody would agree that who participated or came to see us. So thanks to everybody, especially to Phil G4LPP, who was the team leader, but to everybody else who put in a lot of time and effort for it and came along to see us indeed over the weekend. It was a really good event. I think I'm allowed to tell you that we've got a technical maximum of 249 contacts, but as always with these things, there's a few to probably be whittled out with dupes and things like that. But we hope to upload our log soon, and we hope to have done quite well, especially bearing in mind this is the first serious VHF station that Norfolk Amateur Radio Club has entered for some years. So thanks again to everybody's support on that. I think we've actually got a quick couple of videos that we can show you. Sorry to give you no notice on this, Tammy.
That's right.
These only came like minutes ago, so I hope they're going to play out all right. Here we are.
He's going to get done.
Seems to be going for a race round a field.
I'll go through there, I'll go through the gate.
Mast. What our neighbours thought of all this, I'm sure. Now there's a little dance of Land Rovers. The boys on top here then, doing those flashing of lights. Thanks very much as well, by the way, to Mark G0TMT. I literally downloaded this minutes ago from a Google Drive. So, and that's Chris on the back there. He's not just hitching a lift there; he is actually holding it steady and making sure and guiding Sonny, who's driving.
I thought
there.
he was just getting a lift.
Really? Oh, did you? Okay.
We'll go straight into the next.
And we've got another quick video for you as well.
Mike 7 Delta Quebec Oscar, you're 59015 in Japan Ocean 02 Lima November, and the code is November Kilo, okay?
Richard on the right and Phil on the left.
Yep.
92, can you double check?
What?
92.
Yeah.
There we are. So a little bit of a glimpse of that. I must admit, I took another video as well, and for some reason that hasn't gone through. But thanks to Mark G0TMT for those 2 videos, and we'll try and get you the other video as well at some point, because that was the opening of the contest. Anyway, thanks once again, and well done to all of the team and everybody who contributed in whatever way. Even if they just worked us, that was still really important to us, especially at 2 in the morning. I can vouch for that. Now, I want to tell you next about another big event that we've got coming up. We've mentioned it before, but got a lot more detail now. And that's Radioactive, which is in about 10 days' time, the weekend after next, on the 3rd and 4th of June. And we've got quite a few things that we can now tell you about it. So I've mentioned this before again, but it's a weekend really of radio, workshops on construction, repair and setting up of radios, and informal talks and socialising. So it's really a fun weekend all about radio. So it's first and foremost really why it was this weekend, apart from it normally being great weather. It's National Field Day, which is a CW contest. Now I know that wouldn't interest everybody, and indeed not everybody can do CW. So at the same time, there's also a 6-metre SSB station, and they're on 2 separate fields, but just a short walk from each other. And then there's a building there, our works premises, which is where you can actually socialise, you can make teas, coffees, and there's lots of other talks and workshops and things going on. Now, a few things I'd like just to mention specifically, because this is where we'd like a bit of support and help from you. So there's going to be a couple of maker projects. Now, they're projects which we suggest that you make here at the weekend. You don't have to, but I think in one of them in particular, you'll find much easier if you make here. So our project one, shall we call it, is from Nick M0HGU. And this is on Saturday, and you'll be able to build it on the Saturday and on the Sunday if you want to, or you can take it home. It's an SWR level indicator meter. Now, I want to just show you at this point, maybe we can use camera one, Tammy. This is the meter that we're going to use. Now, this is from one of my sources. Just get it, there we are. Just get rid of the lighting reflecting on that. So this is a lovely size meter. This is really quite a large meter. We've managed to source that at a very good price. And we're going to, and Nick's designed a project around that to make an SWR level indicator. And it even includes a PCB etching. Actually, if we can just show the insides of it, Tammy. This is the prototype. So this is what it looks like inside. This is the one that Nick's made. You can see on the right we've got an SO239, the top right, and there's a B and C on the top left. That's because you can specify either. But that PCB, you'll even learn how to etch a circuit board, which is a sort of kind of almost a dying art, I think, now. Even schools can't do it, I believe. CNS school were doing it until the risk assessment just wouldn't allow them to do it, which is a great shame. So you'll learn how to make that whole project, including etching the circuit board, under the expert tuition of Nick. And it's an SWR level. It's really because we don't want to call it an SWR meter, because it's not going to be fully calibrated as maybe a commercial one would be. But the great thing is it's only £15, and you'll have the great satisfaction of saying that you built it yourself. You can see it's relatively easy to solder, and we'll teach everything. So if you've never made anything like this in your life, we will not assume any knowledge and experience, and we'll help you at the weekend. Now, project number 2. So that's going to, by the way, now that's going to be £15. There is one thing important there on the screen, and that is there's a maximum of 10. And that's because at the moment, that's the only number of meter movements that I can source, although we could do something later on. But really, it's not practical to be able to etch circuit boards and things at the school. So there's a maximum of 10 people. And I'd like to hear from you very, very soon if you would like to build one. They're £15 each. That's the whole kit, the meter, the sockets, everything. Everything that you'll need to make that and walk away with it. Now, our second project is also, I think, going to be popular. Tammy, can we just show the insides of this? This is from Steve G0KYA. You might have seen this antenna that he's developed in recent years in use at Caister for Marconi Day, for example. The difference between this and another end-fed half-wave antenna that he's done is that this is multi-band, and it will give you good performance between 10 and 40 meters. Now, that's the inside of the box. So it's not hugely difficult. You can see that you've got a large core in the middle there, and you've got sockets. This is the prototype that you're looking at there. The real thing will look a little bit different. I'll show you the box in a moment. And including the 68 feet of wire, it will be good 24 strand 0.2 wire, and even an egg insulator will cost you just £22. You'll be able to make this at Radioactive, or again, you can make it at home if you wish. There's no circuit boards to etch on this one. Now, the only thing is I've got to sell quite a few of these to be able to sell them at that price. I mean, I did have a quick look actually this afternoon, and if you're looking at something commercial for that, you're looking at £60 upwards. There was one by MFJ for £80. There was one on eBay I found for £22. But this is one designed by one of our own gurus, Steve G0KYA, and I really commend you to have one of these kits. But I do need commitments from people because I want to order these parts before the event. So let me actually, if I just ask Tammy to give me, come back on the camera for me, and I'll show you. So this is, we've changed the box slightly to give a bit more space, and this is a very rigid box. This is what's called an IP65 rated box. It's very tough. It doesn't flex or anything at all. This is the main ferrite core. A third of the cost of the kit is in this core, actually. For those of you who know about these things, it's an FT240/43, a ferrite core. It comes with the wire as well. You'll get this 68 feet of wire, very, very strong, thick wire. And you get even the insulator that you need at the other end to insulate it from whatever you're going to hook it up to, a tree or whatever. So that's those details. Now, what I would love you to do to help me, even though I'll be issuing an order form this weekend, is if you could in the next couple of days just pop an email together for me or even a message, I guess, on Facebook if you wish, and just say, I'd like one of those kits, whichever one it is, whether it's the SWR one or whether it's the NFED halfway, EFHW. It would really help me in the next couple of days plan, because I want to get some of the parts in so that we have as many as possible for people to make at the weekend. That would be really helpful. Thank you very much. And thanks, of course, to Steve and to Nick as well, because they're working on these projects right now. We're still working on them. I'm working on sourcing these cases and things like that. So it is a work in progress, but it will all be ready for the weekend after next. Now, I'm going to just tell you about a few other things that are going on now as well. So on that weekend, there's a Tony's repair shop where Tony G0MQG will show you how he fixes something. And not just anything, it's something that you can take in. So if you've got a faulty bit of ham radio gear or radio gear in general, we hope that you'll bring it along and he will not only fix it, but he'll show you how he fixes it and the methodology that you use when you're trying to fix something like that. He'll use all the test equipment and everything else, and you'll better come and see it actually at Radioactive on that weekend. There's also going to be a demonstration of the Geocron and some Raspberry Pi applications. There's going to be, which we've never done, but we sort of showed a few people at the weekend, and we're going to show you for the first time, if we can put it on a wide shot here, Tammy, so that you can see. There is quite a lot of equipment and things that we use to make NARC Live. You may not believe that, but it was really interesting for a few people just to have a look at it. So we're going to do a kind of studio tour of NARC Live, and you better see how we do it. We're going to do that twice. We're going to do it on the Saturday and the Sunday. You'll be able to have a look at all the equipment. You even be able to do a audition. We might even be able to have a job. You never know. It's maybe the last time that we do NARC Live now. But you'll be able to come and have a bit of fun and see how we do this as well. These are just things that are all happening over the weekend. There's a live propagation and weather forecast on Saturday. On Saturday night, we've got if the weather's good, we've got a drive-in style movie, Under the Stars. On Sunday, we've got another fox hunt on foot, which we've done before, and it's really popular. You'll be able to go in and they're going to sort of hide on some of the beacons around the garden and around the field day stations and everything else, and you'll be able to go and locate them. That'll give you an appetite, hopefully, for the Sunday roast rolls that Tammy and I will be cooking for about 1:30 on the Sunday. And then also, we do have another Radioactive raffle, and I'm really pleased to tell you that all the companies that I approached who've helped us so much in the past, all of them without any delay or anything, have said they'll support us. And in fact, we've got some of those prizes, and I can just give you a little bit of a glance. So thanks to all these companies, BHI, DCP, Gagemaster, ICOM UK, JPR and Martin Lynch. And they've all already, some of them, sent the prizes to us. So there's some of them are not necessarily radio. This is an Airfix kit, which is one of the new generation ones. It makes a lovely Beetle buggy kit, so something different. If you don't want something radio, there's that. But there is something radio, because Martin Lynch gave us this, which is one of the latest TYT radios, portable transceivers. This is digital or analog. It's dual band, 70 sems and 2 meters. It's the UV380, and that will probably be one of our star prizes that you could win on the super raffle. And also ICOM have sent us a box of goodies, and including this is one of the few things I could bring in the studio today, a nice document bag as well. So thanks very much to all of those companies that are supporting us, and I hope you'll support us. You'll be able to buy raffle tickets from next Wednesday at the CNS school. If you're there, you better buy them there, especially if you're not going to make it at the weekend. But of course, you'll also be able to buy the raffle tickets over the Radioactive weekend, and we hope to raise lots and lots of money for Tammy and my charity, which is Alzheimer's UK and cancer research. So I hope that you'll support that event. There's lots of other things happening as well, really. I think I've covered most of them now. You'll also be able to order sort of tools and test gear and things that I've sort of talked to some of the suppliers and tried to get a sort of decent deal on. So you'll be able to buy a really nice quality Antec soldering iron with silicon cable and things like that. So if you wanted to buy, you need to stock up on solder or wire cutters or whatever, you'll be able to order all those things as well. Now, the order form, where you can be able to book your free Sunday lunch or order any of these parts, will be issued this weekend on the newsletter, or it may even be a separate newsletter where I'm going to issue the PDF. I'm still working on the details, all of the program, and you'll be able to book it then. I think that's enough talking about Radioactive, but I hope it interests you all, and I look forward to seeing many of you as possible here at Radioactive on the 3rd and 4th of June. I'm going to move this. This is a bit like Blue Peter. You don't see where they put the stuff, do you, though? But there's a lot of things now.
You will if you come on the studio tour.
Well, you will see, yes, true. You'll be able to see our secret cubbyhole, where you store your drink,
Yeah.
for example, and all that as well. Now, just one other mention I'd like to give for Sunday, the 2nd of July. It's obviously a little way off yet, but it is the Barford Radio Rally. It's Norfolk Amateur Radio Club's annual rally. Very traditional radio rally, open between 9 and 2 to the public, or if you're selling things from 8 o'clock in the morning. Lots of details on our website, I know. Admission is just £2.50 a person, free parking, under 16s are free, and you can have a large outdoor pitch for £8, or we have just 2 tables left inside the village hall, which are £10 each. But if you want one of the indoor tables, you need to book them with me very soon, because there's only 2 left. But the outdoor pitches, you can just turn up on the day. And breathe. Now, finally, we've just got time to tell you, to share with you some members' news that we've had in the last couple of weeks. From Nev, M0NFY, he says, just in case you missed it, there's a report on the BBC website of a Welsh radio amateur being the first to report the SOS from the Titanic. And here it is there. So if you type in BBC and Titanic amateur radio, that will throw you the whole article up there. It says, when the Titanic hit an iceberg while crossing the Atlantic in 1912, his telegraphers desperately sent out distress calls, hoping somebody somewhere might hear them. But among the first to respond was an amateur radio operator some 2,000 miles away in South Wales. Self-taught Arthur Moore received the signal at his homemade station in Blackwood, Caerphilly, and he rushed to the local police station, but was met with incredulity. So, really good story to have a look at that on the BBC website. Next, Bob G6PWS shares us some pictures of his recent holiday away at his sister's in Lochinver in West Scotland. He says, my nephew runs a boat ferry service and fishing hire, and we went on a trip to an island just outside the loch. Very windy and cold, but warm in the sun. These are just some of my memories. Beautiful sunrises and sunsets, and of course, the views. And finally, the last bit of... Thank you very much, yes, Bob, for sending those. And last but not least, from you, Donard, M0KRK, sent us this picture. What happens if someone slaps you at high frequency?
It hurts.
It does.
Apparently.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thanks very much for all your entries and news to us. Tammy, round to you for Little People.
Okay, here's a quick Little People for this week. This is what you need on your next field day.
There isn't mushroom there.
Ha ha.
Yeah, okay.
Ha ha.
That's good, isn't it?
You'd never know, would you?
No, not at first glance. This is always the clever stuff about this. Miniature-calendar.com. That website has a new picture every day, and Tammy picks one for us. Thanks, Tammy. That's really good. Yes, as you say, for the next field day. Dishes, maybe we're going to go to super high frequencies.
Maybe,
then, to
maybe.
Gigahertz, maybe, instead of just megahertz. Thank you very much. As I said, thank you very much for sending us the news. Do keep in touch. We'll be meeting again here in 2 weeks' time. So we love to have your stories, your pictures, and just to keep up to date and keep us in touch. Now, 2 weeks ago, I tried, sort of, to get out of a debt that I'd raised, which some of you, I think, were concerned that I'd never paid Tammy £5, because I bet some time back that people would never guess what something was. Well, one of you sent us a picture, and this is it. What on earth is this? And he said, this is a chance for me to win my £5 back. I'll tell you who it was in a moment, I think, and I'll read you what he put. But this is the pictures that he sent me, at least a couple of the pictures that he sent me. And that is quite revealing, isn't it? So let's see how close you were. And if one of you's guessed what it is, I lose, it's double or quit, so I lose £10 to Tammy. But if you haven't guessed it, I get to keep money. Do you want to see the money? I see you looking over here rather nervously, Tammy. So
Thanks. Is that the £5 though?
that is the £5. Do you want to count it again?
No.
And there's another £5.
We need to just start calling out the answers now.
All right then. So Firstly, Steve G3VA says, is the item a machine for testing pressure on the eye?
Phil G4LPP, I would guess it's an old-fashioned photograph copier.
Steve G4GHO, I believe the object this week is an optical comparator for viewing the difference between two objects, probably such as a small, newly manufactured PCB or other component. It looks like the internal illumination can be varied to create a form of Pepper's ghost, reflected from the angled plane mirror and projected onto the viewing screen. Then the images could possibly be swapped or flipped alternately to see the difference between a reference model and the newly made part. Hoping I'm close.
Brian M7SEY, I think it has a timer on the left and an intensity dial on the right, so perhaps it's an early kind of UV printer. A test bed also has the puffer for injection of, say, a toner power, perhaps the world's first photocopier.
Well, that's interesting. That's the second person who thought it might be a copier. I love the ingenuity that's gone into this and the thinking, by the way. Bruce G4KZT says, I think this week's What on Earth is This is a device to measure light intensity by comparison with an internal light. If I'm right, then sorry, David, you owe Tammy a tenner. If I'm wrong and nobody else gets it right, then sorry, Tammy, but I tried.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. Martin G7UGB, I think the mystery object is a developer-type machine for negatives or circuit board printing, as it has a timer and an intensity control on the front and looks like a lamp inside. Here's hoping.
Nobody's for me, are they? Steve M0YRU and Marie M7YRU says, maybe it's some kind of X-ray machine? And Tony M0TDK says, I think that the current mystery object is a device for copying the screen of an oscilloscope or spectrum analyzer. This one looks like the early type that took photographs of the screen and was possibly made by Tektronix. Later versions of this used Polaroid film, while some early ones allowed you to trace the screen with a pencil against a ground glass screen. This one looks like it took images onto glass plates, so may date from the 1950s and may have a feature where you could superimpose an image onto that oscilloscope screen. In the unlikely event that I'm right, I only hope this will not cost you too much, David. We could have a whip brand. Now, this is the answer of what it is. What on earth was this? This is it. Now, it's called a tachistoscope. Hard to pronounce. If you look on the label on the right, that's what it is. That's the name of the actual product. Now, this is what Nev M0NFY, who sent me this picture to try and get me to win my money back. This is what he said. A chance to win your £5 back. I very much doubt that anyone will know what this is. Yeah, that's what I thought before though, Nev. I picked it up at a car boot sale as I thought that the case would come in handy one day. It is a tachistoscope. I'll let you Google what it's used for. The top hit says, what is a tachistoscope used for? It's hard. Yeah, tachistoscope has been used to test the limits of human visual perception, such as determining the minimum exposure time needed for visual apprehension of various stimuli, including shapes, colours, letters, words and numbers. And Wikipedia, good old Wikipedia, says that a tachistoscope is a device that displays an image for a specific amount of time. It can be used to increase recognition speed, to show something too fast to be consciously recognised, or to test which elements of an image are memorable.
There you go.
Well, this is difficult because, I mean, nobody quoted what that was. But then, to be totally honest, did you know what that was? I've never heard of it.
I thought it was something like, I could see the puffer thing. I wonder if it was something to do with an eye test. That's what I said to you after last week's show.
And some people said that. Because,
you know, you get puff of air in your eye and things.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that. I think it's fair. And I'm trying to be honest here, guys, right? So, however, I have to say that I think Steve came quite close, really. And also Bruce, who said... So Steve was the one who said it was an optical... Just a minute. That's what it's like at home. I mean, Steve thought it was an optical comparator for viewing the difference between two objects, which is sort of a bit. And Bruce says, I think this week's What on Earth is a device for to measure light intensity by comparison with an internal light. And that was really well deduced by looking at what it was.
So, here you go.
So
I'll give you
we-
20p back and we'll call it quits. Right, on to next
you
week.
sleep all right, do you?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you for trying, Nev. Let's get down to this week's competition. That's it. I got a little bit back. What on earth is this? Do you know what that is or what it's for? Answers to radio@dcpmicro.com, and we'll reveal all in 2 weeks' time. Do you know what that is or what it's for? radio@dcpmicro.com, as for anything for the programme. Quickly just tell you before we get to meet our tonight's guest, this week at NARC on Sunday, we've got the GB2RS News on GB3MB at 7 p.m. and on Monday we've got the Monday Night Net also on GB3MB at 7:30. And at 8 o'clock we've got the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, a week tonight, on May the 31st, we're back meeting at the school at CNS for a social and a Raspberry Pi jam session. So if you're part of the Raspberry Pi group, please join us at the school then, and social for everybody else between the new times of 7 and 9:30 p.m. And of course, as I said, thank you very much for all the news and pictures and things you sent us. Please keep in touch and keep sending those to us. And also, if you'd like us to send one of these NARC cards to anybody to cheer them up or to celebrate or commiserate, then please send us the details of them and we'll be very happy to send it to them. Still got lots of stuff on my desk here. Now on to our main event. Now, a few months ago, we actually had Mike Richards, G4WNC, who came to tell us about a software tool called Node-RED, and he gave us a basic introduction. Well, Roger, who books these talks for us, actually found someone who could give us a bit more in-depth detail about Node-RED and how you can use it in amateur radio. So we're really pleased to welcome Kyle, AA0Z from the States. Hello, Kyle.
Hello, how are you?
We're good, thank you. Thank you for being patient. We're a little bit later than I said to join you, but as you can see, we do try and use this as a way of a sort of club meeting, as it were, for those who can't make it to the club, and to meet people like yourself. So thank you very much for waiting. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you. This is my first international presentation, so I'm
really?
excited.
Okay, yeah, well, we're really looking forward to this. So I've given a little tiny bit of introduction, as I've said before. Node-RED is a programming tool, and of course, as always, during Carl's talk, you'll be able to ask questions and make comments. Maybe you've used Node-RED, or you've got some comments or questions for him, then please ask them in the usual way, either on Facebook or on BATC messaging. But now I'm going to hand over to Kyle, and we'll come back to you for your questions in the end. Kyle.
Very good. Thank you, David. So this is Intro to Node-RED. We're going to talk about dashboards and control web pages for, this is not just for contesting, but for DXing and just general automation of your shack on a day-to-day basis. So basically, I'm going to tell you, this is for everyone. I am not a programmer. I did not go to school to be a programmer, but if I can figure this stuff out, you can figure this stuff out too. It's very easy. So let's get started here. So what is Node-RED? It was developed by IBM in 2013. 3.02 is the latest, and it's built on Node.js, which is basically JavaScript. It is browser-based, so you have a server and you have a client, and I'm going to show you how to install it on a Raspberry Pi, and it installs everything that you need. You take another computer, or you can take the Raspberry Pi that you installed it on. But let's say you take your laptop and you connect to the Raspberry Pi via a web page, and that is all you need. That is the dashboard and the page that you configure your flows on to run Node-RED. I'm going to show you more about that later. It runs basically on anything, Windows, Mac, Linux, a Raspberry Pi. If you got an old PC laying around, that will work. It does not take a lot of horsepower. I even run a instance for POTA activations on a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is, geez, probably 10 or 15 years old. It's old, and it runs a little slow, but it still runs, and it's good. And then also, the nice thing about Node-RED is it hides all of that high-level code that I don't understand in the background. And I'm going to show you some nodes that once you open up the configuration of the nodes, it basically is a very easy dialogue for you to put information in and get information out of that node. And you don't have to basically do programming. I don't know how to program. I've never programmed before in my life. But you're able to put some configuration values into each node and get some information out. Down below here, that's a flow here that we're going to be talking about. I don't know if you can see my cursor whenever I move it around, but this is an example of a flow, and then we're going to show you some dashboards to maybe get your brain stimuli going. I've already basically reviewed this slide. I'm not a programmer, but you can do this. This is easy stuff. And you just need some logic to figure out what you need at the end of a flow, right? And you basically do that by baby steps. If A and B are equal to C, what do I need to get out of A and B to equal to C? Or I have A, which might be some information about my radio, and I need to get what mode it's in. Well, that mode is probably inside one of a string of information. I just need to extract that string of information out and pull out the mode, and then pipe it into like a text node to display on my dashboard. So that's kind of the things that we're doing with Node-RED. We have many ready-to-go flows out on our Groups IO, and I'm going to show you the Groups IO at the end of the presentation. We have hundreds of flows out there, probably close to a little less than 1,000 flows of things that you can put out there. You can install right now for different devices in your shack and get it up and running. And you don't have to start with your radio. Let me preference this. People always say, well, my radio is not compatible, or I can't get information out of my radio. I can't do Node-RED. That is not correct. You can start with an amplifier. You can start with a antenna switch. You can start with just putting power into your shack and turning power on and off. And that's another thing I'm going to show you later. So you don't have to start with the radio. You can start with any device in your shack and then build upon that. And then debug nodes, your best friend. I didn't know much about debug nodes, but man, are they helpful whenever you're trying to figure out what's going on with a flow. We're going to show you a little bit about that too. So I hinted on this a little bit. What can Node-RED control? Anything with an input or output. Ethernet, serial, USB. If you can get information out of a device, you could probably control it with Node-RED. Most radios, and I probably need to update this slide, Hamlib or, what is it called? Omnibus, Omnimax, Omni something. I will think of it here in a minute. It is another program that does cat control. I think like DX Suite uses that piece of software. But anything that there's only a couple of radios that are native to Node-RED. Whenever I say native, you can get stuff directly or cat control directly out of them. Flex and Elecraft are the main two that you can pull information out. The other ones are a little bit tougher, but you can get information. There's a flow for ICOM, and some other people are doing some Yaesus. Some of them are harder than others, but there are flows out there. Amplifiers, tuners, rotors, antenna switches, relays. These are basic things that you have in your shack today, right? So this stuff is, there's flows out there. You can install them. I had somebody come up to me after I did this presentation a couple times, and they said, I still don't understand why you would want to use Node-RED. And I had to put the slide together to basically convince people on why you should use Node-RED. The main thing I use Node-RED for is command and control and to monitor everything in one place, right? So I have, in my contest station, I have the radio in front of me, but the amplifier is way over here, and it's a big head turn to turn the amplifier. And the SWR meter is behind me too. So unless I turn my head and take a look at my SWR meter, my antenna could be way out of whack and I don't know it. And I'm so enthralled with N1MM that sometimes I don't even look at the radio to see what's going on. So I like to have two monitors up, and I like to have my N1MM instance in one location, and then I have Node Red running in the second location, and that's telling me everything that's going on with my station right there on a computer screen. It's also giving me real-time feedback, right? It's telling me what's going on, right? I am able to monitor SWR, my audio levels, how much my amplifier is putting out, all of that stuff. Command and control, I use whenever we're not contesting at the station, we use that as our remote station. So I'm able to get, I live in St. Louis here in Missouri, and the contest station is about 2 hours south of me, and I'm able to pull up everything as I'm sitting there, and I've got my push to talk button, I've got my headphones and my microphone, I've got my CW key, and I'm able to contest remotely from 2 hours away to my contest station, and it's seamless. It's like I'm sitting right there. Custom alarms. I also thought that I had somebody who emailed me and was a blind ham and said Node Red has changed the way that they operate, because now there is an audio node that you can put into Node Red that will announce anything that you want it to announce. It's basically, text to speech. And every time that the SWR meter hits 1.7 or above, it announces to this ham that the SWR is out of spec. So he was very grateful for that. And then also it announces the frequency and the band and all that other stuff. So we were able to get him going, as an audio tool to get him on the air. And also eliminate errors. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm contesting or playing on the radio at 3 o'clock in the morning and I've hit a brick wall and I want to change from 20 meters CW to 40 meters SSB, I'm going to forget something. I am going to forget something. So Node Red is I'm able to change bands and change modes in about 2 clicks of a mouse button, instead of doing all the things that I had to do on the radio, push a bunch of buttons, tune the amplifier, do all these things, these manual things to get me to change bands and modes. Now I do it with 2 clicks on the on Node Red. All right, so how does this all connect? So the heart of the station, I'm going to preach the religion of Raspberry Pi here. I'm not really sure if I'm sure it's probably hard to get Raspberry Pis when over there too, but I think the stock is coming up, and I actually saw some Raspberry Pis in my micro center locally, so I think that they're easier to get now. But the heart of this system is a Raspberry Pi 4, and of course it has USB and Ethernet, which are probably the 2 easiest buses that you can put information on. And all of these devices that you see here are either Ethernet, serial, or USB. Serial is basically, whenever I say serial, it comes serial out of a K3 or K3S, but basically it plugs into a USB port through a FIDI device, which is basically just a chipset. So all of these devices that you see here are things that you can control in your shack, and the method that you control them by. So you've got Ethernet, we've got USB, we've got serial, and I'll point out a couple of devices here that one we're going to take a look at, but another one I want to point out because it is a really game changer in the remote space and just in your shack today. So over here is this DLI Web Switch Pro. This device, and we're going to take a look at this device later, this has got 8 AC relays, and it's got 2 over here that are always on. And this thing plugs into Ethernet, and it's controllable by Node Red, and basically you're able to turn AC devices on and off remotely or locally in your shack. I've got an Astron power supply. I plug the Astron power supply into the Web Switch Pro, let's say into port number 1, and then I plug this guy into Ethernet into the Raspberry Pi, or in my location, we plug it into an 8-port switch. This also has wireless, so you can control it via wireless. And I leave the power supply switch to the on position, and I use the relay in the Web Switch Pro to turn the power on and off to all of my peripherals in my station. The second thing I want to talk about is this coax disconnect. This is a Paradan radio antenna disconnect. This thing has saved our butt many, many times. Whenever you apply power to this device, it attaches the relay inside and attaches the coax from your radio to your antennas. Whenever you remove power from it, it detaches the coax, and it's got a lightning arrestor built into it. We've got many lightning arrestors and one source of ground. So do all of the things that you need to do to protect your station. But this disconnects your antennas from your radio, physically disconnects the radio from the antennas, and that makes me sleep at night whenever there's thunderstorms in the area. So we talked about the different types of radios and the different types of connections. Flex is the easiest. There are nodes and flows that Stephen Hauser N1SH created that if you have a Flex today, you basically download this flow, you install the Flex nodes, you're up and running. It is putting stuff on the dashboard. I can show you the remote station after we're done if we have some time. Gives you all the information that you need about your Flex. And this is an example flow of the Flex flow that Stephen created. Like I said, the KX3, well, the KX3 does it too, but the K3 or the K3S, that is through a serial node, and you drag a serial node over, and you point it to the USB device that you plugged in, and it's communicating over serial/USB. And then we've got HamLib or OmniRig. OmniRig was what I was thinking about. That is a third-party program that you can run, that you can send API commands to. It's basically just a command to say, hey, give me the status of the radio, give me the ports. I'm sorry, give me the mode, give me the frequency, give me some other stuff, and I'm going to report back through the Raspberry Pi and then through Node-RED what's going on with my radio. So here is some example dashboards. It's kind of blurry, but we're gonna get into 1080p here. So this is basically what we can build in Node-RED, and no one dashboard looks the same. They all look different. It all depends on what you want to program in your Node-RED system. This one, I call this one the Fruity Pebbles of Node-RED. It's got a lot of colors. It's very, very rainbowish. And then here is another over here on the right-hand side. Down here on the bottom, this is somebody wrote an SWR plot of your antenna, and you can run this. You can run or install the flow and then run this SWR plot, and it will go through and change frequency and then report back on the SWR plot for your antenna. This one's a little bit more advanced. This is Dave WO2X, and he has got, you can see, he's got some buttons here. He's got some gauges for input and PA voltage. He's got a rotor azimuth map, and basically this map is clickable. You just click on the map, and your rotator rotates to that location. More buttons, more gauges, and then of course he's got his Flex radio. But this is Dave WO2X's station. Here is a double tower with rotators. W7GES. And he's got some presets down here. And here's some gauges, some linear gauges. One thing that you can do is you can put style sheets in, and you can make them, the buttons more round. You can, basically, it's a web page. You can do anything that's HTML. Here is our, actually, this is an old slide. I probably need to update this, but this is what my station did look like a couple of months ago. And I've got some Raspberry Pi monitoring going here. I've got some switches here that turn different things on and off. Network status, so it goes out and pings Google, gives me the millisecond, ping millisecond, graphs that there. Here are some LEDs that it shows me what is on and what is off. Got some WAN router fail history, so I've downloaded a flow and kind of customized it. It will tell me whenever my WAN goes down. Got some some weather stuff going on here. And here is our 3 tower at my contest station. So we've got our 3 towers here. And then we've got our 6-pack, our 2x6 6-pack array solutions, where we use an EA4TX box to control that. And then at the base of each tower, we have a WA4 MCM 4-port switch that basically switches the antenna on the tower. It just sends, like an RCS4, it sends positive voltage, negative voltage, no voltage, or AC down the line with a bias T, and switches the antenna switch at the base of the tower. So we've got 3 of those. We're going to put a 4th one in. And then you can also do cool stuff and not even do stuff with or ham radio stuff with Node-RED, but you can display things into a web page. Here, somebody put together a band activity heat map in the upper left-hand corner. So you can choose Europe, and you can see what bands are hot. You can bring in propagation maps. Here's some solar stuff, de-expeditions, the solar data information that everyone knows and loves. Geochron, you can put Geochron, and then I've got the Parks on the Air mapping software, where I basically map all of the parks on the air that are going on or being activated. I also built a cluster node aggregator. So this takes a bunch of cluster nodes or cluster telnet server, and aggregates them all together and then pipes it out in one telnet server. And I connect to that telnet server so I don't miss a spot. I know it's kind of redundant, but I did some research, and you wouldn't believe how different some of these telnet clusters are. So I decided to aggravate them all together and pipe them out to one. Here I built a reverse beacon network map. So whenever I call CQ, it maps where I'm actually being heard. Because whenever, I don't know about you guys, but on the reverse beacon network, whenever I see that, my call sign come across, I don't know where these places are, right? I have no idea where I'm being heard. Like, I can see the call sign, but, I don't know where those stations are actually located at. So this maps where I'm being heard on the reverse beacon network. And then you can basically make these markers time out after, a couple of minutes. Here is a contest dashboard that myself and Connor, WD9 LSV, are working on. So basically, it displays, it's a visual display of what's coming out of N1MM. And so you're not hovering over somebody's instance of N1MM trying to figure out what the score is and, who was the last couple of contacts that you made. Basically, the upper right-hand or upper left-hand corner gives some stats and maps all of the contest queues, gives some information about what the radios are doing. This one in the upper right-hand corner basically is a contest within a contest. So you've got a multi-op going on, and it aggregates all of the scores and pairs the operators against one another within the multi-op. So basically, it puts your butt in the seat, because if you're in second place and you're only in second place by, a couple hundred points, that's going to drive you to get your butt in the seat and take over the next guy. And I've just got some stats, some radio stats, band stats, and then this down in the lower right-hand corner pulls from the online scoreboard, and you can put 4 of your friends in there and chase them on the scoreboard. We're revamping this with, we had actually had a meeting with Victor, who is one of the coordinators and developers of the online scoreboard over Hamvention, and we're going to revamp that. So what is a node? So let's get into what a node is. Basically, it is the building block of Node-RED. You've got a whole bunch of different nodes that you can pull over to your workspace. An inject node and a debug node are probably some of the most common. They have a start and a stop, or you can start a flow automatically through an inject node. But I'm just pulling your attention to these nubs over here that you can start and stop these nodes through your mouse. We've got function nodes, change nodes, dashboard nodes. So everything in teal is a dashboard node. Those take information into the input and then display that information on your dashboard. So a button. So you want a button to say something whenever, let's say, the button will say 40 meters whenever you put, you send 40 meters, a string, basically a string, into the button. You can make it say 40 meters. Text, I think it's probably that self-explanatory. If you send it a string of text, it's going to display the string of text. A drop-down, basically, if you send it a list of bands or a list of modes, it's going to put that in the drop-down, and you can pull that down in your dashboard. And a gauge, so like a speedometer, right, or maybe a thermometer. It's going to show you what the average temp is, but then you've got a minimum and a maximum that you can set in the configuration. So remember, whenever I was talking about I'm not a programmer, and you can basically program this without any programming knowledge, this is what I'm talking about. So all of these nodes every node has a configuration page. Some are more advanced than others, but you can see the different configuration pages for an inject node, a debug node, a switch node, and a change node. So let's just pick one here that is probably the easiest to maybe understand. Actually, let's go through 2 of them. An inject node, that starts a flow. So here it says this is probably pretty small for you guys, but this says message payload. In Node-RED, the default information that you pass from node to node is called message payload. So that could be a value, that could be a string, a number, an array, an object. And if you don't know what those are, the Node-RED cookbook has got information on all this stuff, and I'll show you more about that. But in this case, we pretty much start all of the nodes through a timestamp. Basically, that is just a number of I think it's milliseconds from January 1st, 1970, I think. So it injects that number, and then basically after it starts the flow, we inject that number into the next flow. It just disregards what that number is. And you can also, the purpose of flows is to run over and over and over, like for you in automation, a PLC. It's a big loop, runs over and over and over. So basically what we say is, hey, inject a timestamp, start the flow, but then I'm going to repeat it every second. So I want to pull, let's say, a network switch every second and tell me what your status is, right? Tell me what port you've got selected. So it does that over and over and over. This switch over here, it's basically then a big if then else, right? So if I have a payload, and that payload is called message.payload.mode, and I say that that string coming in, let's say it's FT8. So that string comes in as a message payload.mode, and I'm comparing it to the rest of the values that I defined down here. The values that I defined is CW, FT8, FTR, FT4, single sideband, or PSK31, let's say. So in our example, we said, all right, that's FT8. So whenever it gets to FT8, it is going to send that out the second union, the second from the top. I forgot what this is called. But anyway, you can see these joins here, which wire the nodes together. And so for the case of what we were just talking about, FT8, it would send that payload, what we, the message.payload.mode, it would send that out this second one down from the top, because that is the second one down from the top. And a change node just changes whatever payload you've got coming in. Maybe you want to change, or you want to set, I don't know, a color for an icon. You could do that here. So let's talk about dashboard nodes. So dashboard nodes display stuff on the dashboard, and all of the dashboards have configurations. Here is text. So we give it a label of 1 hour low rates. The default, oh, sorry guys, the default is message payload. Let's say that is the term Q, or the string QRZ. So that is what message payload is. And then you can see down here in the example, it is the label. Well, I've got this incorrect, but the label should be 1 hour low rate instead of current database. 1 hour low rate should be here, and then the value, we said the value was QRZ, and the value here is QRZ. Okay, here's a button, and buttons have different properties, right? You can give it a label, give it a background color, give it a main color for the text. Now, and also you can say, all right, hit a configure it for a submit button or a cancel button, or basically just, send anything you want. Send a timestamp, send a string, send a number, send a Boolean, a true or a false. You can configure it that way. And then the gauge. So you can, you have different gauges. This drop-down gauge, it's there's, like 360-degree gauges if you want to do wind speed, or I'm sorry, wind direction. Here we're just doing a regular gauge, and this is what that gauge looks like. And then you can color code it, and as it goes up in value, it turns yellow, and then it turns red. So here is an example flow, and let's just go over this example flow real quick. So we're going to trigger the flow every second. We're going to query this serial device. Let's say that's a K3, and then out of that serial device, we are going to get the mode and the band. So from our previous example of a switch node, we have two options: band or switch, or band or mode. So whenever this value comes into the switch node, and let's say the top one is mode, it's going to send the mode through this wire up to this node, and it's going to send the band down to this node through this wire, and it's going to go into another switch node, which then is going to break it out by single sideband, CW, or digital. And then once it determines what mode it is, so that's just a text file or a text, just a string of text, CW, SSB, digital, and then once it determines that, it's going to figure out what junction to send this out of, and then it's going to set it into a change mode, and then we're going to set a manual parameter called mode to SSB or to CW or to digital, and then we're going to display that on the dashboard. Same thing with band. We're going to come down here. It's going to tell us we're on 40 meters. It's going to come out this node, this junction right now, or right here. It's going to come in through this this wire. It's going to set the band to 40 meters, a parameter called band. It's going to set that to 40 meters, and it's going to display that in this dashboard node. Here's this digital loggers web power switch, and here's the flow for this guy. And I already talked a little bit about this. It's got 8 ports, switchable ports. 2 are always on, and it basically has the default dashboard. Looks like this. And here is I've got one in the back of my amp rack, and this turns the amp rack on and on, turns station A and B on and off. It can turn the Pi that is in the back of the amp rack on and off, and then this amp A and amp B is just relays, and it turns the amp on and off because it's 220 volts. The other thing that's cool about this device is that it has an auto ping. So you can attach this thing to, let's say, your WAN router or a Raspberry Pi or anything and say, hey, ping this device every 30 seconds. And if you don't get a couple of pings back in a couple of minutes, go ahead and reboot that port. So what's the first thing that happens whenever you call for support on your WAN router? They always say, have you rebooted your device? Well, if you're remote, it's kind of hard to reboot your device if your internet is down, right? So this assures that if the internet goes down for a certain amount of time, it goes ahead and reboots the router and clears all the crap out of it. Here's another device, KM-Tronics Web Relay. This has got 8 normally open, normally closed relays. This is the flow. You can disable flows within a larger flow. So I've got these disabled. I use this to turn my flex on and off, and I also use it for the PTT, so whenever SmartLeak needs to re-engage or re-authenticate, I can actually turn the push-to-talk on and off on my flex. Here's an example of a Raspberry Pi where you're monitoring CPU temperature, memory, disk space. You can reboot the device. You can shut down the device, which is dangerous on a remote station, but you can do that. So let's install Node-RED and start some programming here. So I'm going to walk you through some of the what you can do to get up and running. So we're going to concentrate on a Raspberry Pi. It's one line, one script, one thing. It does it all. All you have to do is type this in. Actually, all you have to do is go to the Node-RED webpage and copy it and type it into your Raspberry Pi. And all this stuff is at nodered.org. And basically, if you just Google nodered.org or Node-RED Raspberry Pi install, this will come up, guarantee it. You can also run this in Windows. It's a little bit tougher, but you can do it. My only advice to you with running it in Windows is it's going to bring up a DOS window, right? It's going to bring up the old school DOS window. Do not shut that window down because that is basically the shell that it runs in. So once that comes up, don't close that window down. You can minimize it, but don't close it, or don't kill the window because it will kill Node-RED. All right, here's the workspace. So let's get into the nitty-gritty here of Node-RED. Your workspace and your dashboard these are the 2 most frequent questions we have on the groups IO whenever we help new users. They're like, where's my workspace and where's my dashboard? It's either localhost and it's on port 1880, so that's the default. It installs a web server in the back end, so you don't have to install anything. Again, that one script for Node-RED will install everything that you need. I'm going to take a drink of water here. Everything that you need is in that script. So let's say you install this on a Raspberry Pi, and then you go to your laptop and you want to get into your Node-RED server. So it's the IP address of your Raspberry Pi, :1880 is the workspace. That's where all the flows go, and that's where you program all the flows. The dashboard is at /UI. That's where the dashboard's at. That's where all your display stuff is at. Now, the key to this, if anybody's taking notes at home, the key to this is the first thing that you do after you get Node-RED up and running is you got to go in and you got to install the default dashboard nodes. Don't ask me why that is not installed by default. I don't know. It should be. But I'm going to show you how to install install user nodes off of the internet through the repository, and I'll show you how to do that. But the first thing you do is install the dashboard nodes, which is basically node-red-dashboard. That is the default nodes that you want to install. So we'll get into that in a minute. I'm not sure why that's all blurry, but interesting. It's a little blurry on this end. Not sure if it's blurry on your end, but this is basically an example of a flow.
Yeah, it is actually a little bit blurred for us, but yeah. Maybe you could work through it for us?
Yeah. So this is what a typical flow looks like in the workspace. You've got, let's go back to the next one. Now let's go to the next one. So this is your workspace, and we're going to go through some of the things in the workspace here. So this is a web page. It runs on port 1880, and here are tabs along the top. You can put different flows into different tabs, and they can run simultaneously. You don't. One of the questions we had a couple of weeks ago is, my tabs are not running at the same time. The tabs are running at the same time. So if you put a couple of flows in tab 1 and rename it, and put a couple of flows in tab 2 and rename it, they will all they will all run the same. As long as you are injecting, make that inject node, engage those nodes every 2 or 3 seconds or whatever the frequency is, they will run. Over here on the left-hand side, you've got your palette. These are all of the nodes that either you have installed manually or they have come with the program. That's basically your palette. That's where you can drag and drop nodes from over here and put them into the palette and then wire them together. This is your main workspace here. Then you've got your deploy button, which is basically your compile button. So after you do a bunch of stuff right in the workspace, then you're going to see if it has any errors in it, and you're going to hit the deploy button and it will tell you if it has any errors. And then you've got these sidebar menus, which is up here underneath the deploy button, and they've got values that we'll talk about a bit. And then we've got the sidebar with it's got its information. Okay. So another question we get all the time is, I don't understand what these nodes are. These are function nodes. These are to start a flow, to connect a device, to manipulate data, to move data forward through the flow. A debug is on these function nodes, and this is what we call function nodes. These in teal or light blue, or however you want to call the color here, these are dashboard nodes. These have inputs, not outputs. Those have inputs that display information on the dashboard. You can see some of them have outputs because some of them are pass through, but mostly these are to display information on the dashboard. So let's focus up here in the upper right-hand corner. So we're in the large workspace. We're here in the upper right-hand corner, okay? So remember the deploy button. We have that up here. That's to compile. But then you've got this hamburger menu that is a drop-down. And the two main things that you're going to be concerned with right off the bat is the import and the manage palette. The import is probably what you can guess. is to import a flow. So a friend sends you a flow, or you get a flow from the group's IO. You can import that flow into your instance of Node-RED, and it should look exactly like it did whenever your friend exported it. Okay. Flows are exported in the JSON format, and they have a JSON file name, and then they can email that file. It's just a text file with JSON information in it, and you import that into your Node-RED flow, and then once you compile it, and if it compiles with no errors, it will run. The managed palette is where you install nodes from the internet. So this is where you would install that node-red-dashboard node that installs all the nodes, or package. Let me say you install the package and it installs all the nodes. This is where you would do that from. You'd click on Manage Package or Manage Palette. You'd click the Install tab here. You'd search for Dashboard. You'd go down to where it says node-red-dashboard, and then click the Install button, and it would install it into your palette on your workspace. For this example, I just typed in Morse code, and somebody built a Morse code node, and you can install that and play around with it. Okay. I'm running a little bit short on time here, but we're going to go over just a couple of these. So here's the workspace. We're still up here in the upper right-hand corner below the deploy button. And the things that I want to point out is this bug tab. This is your debug tab. So whenever you place a debug node on a flow, anywhere in the flow, you can put it on every single node, or you can put it on one. You don't have to put it on any. But if you're trying to look to figure out what is coming out of a node, that debug is going to show up in this tab right here. Okay. And as you click on these different tabs, the sidebar changes based on what tab you have selected. This one with the bar graphs, that is the dashboard layout. So this is where you configure your dashboards. Your configuration nodes, I really don't spend a lot of time in there. And if you're more of an advanced programmer, this database, the cylinder, is where your local, flow, and global variables are kept if you use them. Very seldom do I use those, but yeah. And then it's got Git support. So if you want to push something to Git, you can do that. There's a help. I guess that's the most important one, right? The help with the book here. And then if you have enable projects, you can enable projects in the settings file to load different projects. So maybe you've got some things, different projects you're working on. You can select the project, import those flows, get those flows running, work on them, and then change projects if you want. Debugging flows, they're your best friends. They can be attached to basically virtually any node that has an output function. So whenever I put a debug node or place it on another node to get information out of it, I always go into the properties of that debug and I choose complete message object. Remember I told you before, the default payload that you pass to different nodes is message payload. Well, you might be passing other things that are not message payload. You might be passing other properties that you don't know about. So I always come up here, and whenever I place a debug node on a function node or a switch node or a change node, I always come in here and change the output to a complete message object. And then you can see, once you do that, here is a spot here on the right-hand side. Here's a spot that I'm pulling from the POTA webpage, the Parks on the Air webpage. And this is a spot. And see all the information that is given here that's not message payload is US-AK for Alaska. But it's passing all of this other information here that is not part of message payload So you've got a message topic, a message status code, a message original.spot ID, spot activator. Whenever I say spot, I shouldn't say spot, dot, the dot nomenclature. So it's passing all this other information that if you just debugged message payload, you just get one line, US-AK, but it's got all this information in it. All right, so now let's get into the dashboard and how to configure this, because this has a lot of confusion about it too. So we're going to go through this relatively fast, but I think it's pretty easy. So dashboard nodes, the nodes in teal, okay, you put those into groups, okay? Then you put groups into tabs. So if I go back, let's go back here. If I go back to my examples, let's go back to this one. A tab is this E-layer command and control up here in the upper left-hand corner. And you can have multiple tabs. Tabs are basically new dashboards. Each one of these boxes that you see, this 2-post pi status and control, amp rack pi status and control, 2-post power, flex power, network status, those are groups. Okay, you can rename the groups. And then these gauges are dashboard nodes that are put into the group, these groups. So this CPU temperature is a dashboard node that is put into a group called 2-post pi status and control, which then that group is put into a tab called E-layer command and control. Okay, should probably put that slide at the end of it, closer to where we're talking about. But sometimes that confuses people on, I don't know where this went. So this is, again, in our dashboard tab here on the sidebar underneath the deploy. And then you can see that we've got a default tab called tab 1, top level. And then we've got a default group called group 1, group of nodes within a tab. And you can add tabs by clicking on the plus tab. You can add a group by clicking on the plus group. And then this layout is really cool. It is a GUI layout that you can basically shift tabs, shift groups and nodes around and make it look like what you want it to make it look like. Okay. So let's talk about tabs here. So you can see I've got a tab called E-layer command and control, and I've got a tab called antenna switch and rotator, W0 ECC SAT control, DX solar band activity. All of those that I just mentioned are tabs. You come over here, and this hamburger menu on the left-hand side, it's got a drop down, and all of those line up with those tabs. Okay. And then these are groups. You can kind of see this 2-post pi status and control. It's going to line up with the groups that are over here. Let's go back here. One of them that you can really see is this amp rack pi status and control. Well, there's a group called amp rack pi status and control, and it's got dashboard nodes that are placed inside of there. So if I hit this down arrow, you'd see all the dashboard nodes. Now here's the GUI. Here's where it's really cool, where you click on the layout and then this slides over and you can drag and drop the different dashboard nodes inside groups to make them line up and look pretty inside the group. And then you can make a group bigger or smaller through this width. So this one's 6 units across. This one is 3 units. This one's another 3 unit. That's a 3 unit. Here's a 6 unit. You can make them as big or small as you want. Okay. And then here's how the dashboard nodes line up within a group. So here we've got a group called Raspberry Pi Status and Control. So that's the group. This is the GUI in that layout tab. And you can see CPU temperature to gauge. This is where it lies. Memory used, it's a gauge. This is where it lies. Coming down here, CPU temperature, it's a chart. This is where it lies. Reboot, that's a button. And shutdown, there's a button. Here's the weather. Here is a text box. It's got a label of weather. I pass it a text string called clouds from a weather widget. Weather details, overcast clouds. Wind direction, here's a 360 gauge. You can see how it lines up here. Here's a text box, a chart, an LED, a slider. Forgot what that was for a minute. You can also do SVG elements within Node-RED. That's how we get these azimuth charts. Actually, there's a website that generates it automatically. We kind of cheat. But yeah, you can create these charts and import them into Node-RED and yeah, do some automation. All right, I already talked about this. First thing you need to do, go down to Manage Palette, go to Install, and install this Node-RED-dashboard. That's the first thing you do. Here is some information, the Node-RED website. This has got a ton of information on it, absolute ton. If you want to get into the more advanced stuff like arrays or objects or actually programming function nodes, start there in the documentation. That's where I started, and I sat down on an afternoon and I read through it and I was like, oh, I see. I understand what's going on here. And then forums. If you got a very general question, these forums are great. People hang out on them. They're very nice most of the time. They're not qrz.com forums. No, I take that back. They're very helpful, very helpful. But we also have our own forums too, and I'm going to show you that. Actually in this slide. So here is some websites you can go to. The Node-RED website, that's a great one. Here's the Node-RED YouTube page. It's a little boring. Tim O'Leary, he is the, I think he lives in Ireland or Scotland, I can't remember. He is the owner of, or the main programmer of Node-RED, and I will get a ping from him at 3 o'clock in the morning that he is just basically, he's turned on his camera, he is live streaming him literally programming the guts of Node-RED. So if you like that stuff, he's the guy to watch. Some other YouTube channels that are really good. Opto Video is really good. They do process automation stuff, but they also do things that apply to Node-RED, and you're just like, oh yeah, I can apply that to ham radio. Steve Cope is another one that has a really good channel. He puts out stuff about once every couple of weeks about Node-RED. And as Connor, I think Vargra, I think is how you pronounce his name, he has got a really good YouTube channel. He does a lot of home automation stuff, but again, you can take the comments and the principles and the strategies he's put together and apply them in your shack. There is a Node-RED on Reddit. I would go there in caution. It's the wild, wild west over there. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason, and there's a lot of some bad information. But the place that we hang out, everyone that does Node-RED all around the world. We've got people from New Zealand. We've got people from Africa, the Ukraine. We got people all over the place. Is this Groups.io. And basically, if you just search for or put in your browser Node-RED ham radio, it's going to take you right to it. Go ahead and join that, and that's where we all hang out. That's where all the flows are at. That's where it's at. The Groups.io. You'll get all the flows, all the help, all the wikis, everything. Start there. This is where this is the Groups.io. It's where we hang out. This is the files, and this is all of the flows that you can load on day one. right? Somebody has already done the work for you, and all you have to do is import them and do a little work to customize them to your liking, and you can be up and running soon. So here is all the pre-programmed flows that you can download today. I just went through and just did a quick snap of all of the flows. This is not all of them, so it's not complete, but yeah, these are all the things that you can control today. I had to put this slide in. Node-RED is insecure, so it communicates on your local network. Do not expose it to the internet. There are some ways that you can secure it. Is it tough? Yeah, it can be. Is it the right thing to do? It all depends on what environment you run it in. If you run this in an environment on a remote station and other people are going to get into it from around the world, you might want to secure it, and you might want to use a VPN to get into Node-RED and do all the things that you need. If it's just going to be for you in your internal WAN, same thing with anything else on your network. Why go through the hassle if it's not going to be on the internet? So that's my 2 cents about securing Node-RED. So what's next? So join the groups IO. That's where we all hang out. That's where you can get, literally you could post a message in there and says, I'm lost. And somebody will respond and say, all right, tell me where you're at, and we'll get you up and running. So you want to install Node-RED, get it up and running, install additional nodes in the palette. So, install the dashboard. You can search for other nodes that might be of interest to you. Configure and deploy your first flow. Start small, right? I had an old boss at the place I worked at, and he goes, first you got to crawl, then you got to walk, then you got to run. Let's not start running right away. So that's the mentality that you have to have with Node-RED. The problem is it's never done. Like, I will literally be driving down the road and say, oh, I could probably do this with Node-RED. And now I've gotten to the point where my shack is so automated that it scares me sometimes on how automated my shack is. But it's in my control, so that's the good thing. Yeah, and if some of you advanced programmers, if you design a flow on your own and you might think that it's for the well-being of the group, go ahead and upload it to the group's IO files location and share it with others. All of my flows are up on the group's IO. A lot of other people's flows are on the group's IO. So yeah. I have a YouTube page that if you want to subscribe to, I do Node-RED stuff all the time. I released about 5 or 6 Node-RED things that I was doing just a couple of weeks ago. The latest one is securing Node-RED with PuTTY and SSH. But I have a whole playlist on basically, it starts you off with Raspberry Pi prep work on what do you need to do to get a Raspberry Pi prepped for Node-RED. And then I've got another video on installing Node-RED on a Raspberry Pi. And then I go into some other things. I go through the Digital Loggers Web Switch Pro flow in detail to hopefully show you what the logic is that that flow uses to get that thing up and running. So this is a playlist, but if you go to my channel, I've got a whole bunch of other stuff. I also, I'm a big contester. I do POTA a lot. I run the new CW Operators Roundtable every Monday night at 8 p.m. Central. I guess that would be 1 a.m. UTC. I also do monthly ham radio trivia live. So I ask trivia questions, 10 questions per round. You play live on your connected device, and we all sit in the chat and brag about how dumb we are. So, and this is it. I have this presentation. I don't know if you were recording this presentation. If not, no big deal. This whole presentation I gave at Hamcation this year, and it's on my YouTube page. You can go and take a look at all the slides. Again, take a look at all the links, stop the video whenever you need to stop it. It's all there. It's basically the same presentation. So that is it, David. That's all I had.
No, it's a lot from you. Thank you very much indeed, Carl. You mentioned, do we record this? Well, yes, we do record this. We obviously like people to watch live, and we've had 40, 50 people watching live, which isn't bad from a club. But
Nice.
of course, but there are several people who can't watch it live, and so we do record it and we put it up on our YouTube channel. So if you've been watching this live and you want to catch up on some parts or get some of those links down and things, of course, you'll be able to watch those in the next day or so on the NARC channel. Or as Carl said, he's got his own YouTube channels and things. But it's nice when you're doing this live because you can do what I'm going to ask you to do now, which is ask questions and make comments. Have you used Node-RED? Have you got any questions for using Node-RED? This is the second time we've sort of looked at this amazing application. So now is the time to ask them, either on BATC chat or Facebook messaging. That's the one. We do different platforms, so that's where to ask them now. We've already got a couple of questions for you, Carl. So if you've refreshed yourself, I'll kick off with the first one. And that comes from Chris, G0TZZ. Is it possible to set high and low limits within each band or just select bands?
No, you can select. So keep in mind, it's not Node-RED is not to be used to hinder your radio. You can put, well, I guess you would have to turn the VFO if I'm listening to the question correctly. You would have to basically control Node-RED and control your VFO through Node-RED. You could put an upper or a lower value within Node-RED to say, hey, I have one thing you could do. A million things going through my brain. One thing you could do is, let's say you log in, you've got a club station, and you log into that club station with your call sign. And your call sign allows you, of course, different privileges on different bands. And what you could do is, based on that call sign, you could limit what frequencies or range of frequencies that person could transmit on a remote station in Node-RED. So I guess the answer to your question is, yeah, you can control the upper and lower limit. Node-RED there is a million things that you can do in Node-RED. So that band and mode example flow that I showed you is just literally just one of a billion things that you can do in Node-RED. But I guess to answer your question, you could limit what frequencies you could transmit, or an upper or lower band limit. Yes.
Thank you very much, Carl. Yeah, I guess there may be sometimes when you just got to be careful that you don't go out of band, maybe, or just for a particular contest or something where you can only work within certain parameters. So it might be useful. Hope that answered your question, Chris. But if not, please sort of add something on Facebook there. Now on BATC, we've got a question from Mark G6DDX. I've been playing with Node-RED and I'm plotting send and receive spots on a world map, but wonder if there's a way to overlay a full locator grid so it's easier to see where the spots are.
A full locator grid, like the Maidenhead? Is that what he's asking?
Possibly. Mark, if you can clarify that. Is it like the Maidenhead, for example? Locator, I guess, is the question. So there's a little bit of a delay as we do this live, but obviously, as you'll understand, Carl, there's a sort of a 30-second or so slight delay. So Mark, if you can come back on that. I just got a question actually, while we wait for Mark to come back, before you answer that. You've mentioned obviously the Raspberry Pi is a good platform, and as it happens, you might have heard us mention in the club news that we've got an active Raspberry Pi Jam going on in our club. There's about 18 people registered on that, and we're all learning to use Raspberry Pi for the first time. So I guess this is a great application to run on the Raspberry Pi then.
It is. It is. It was basically made for the Raspberry Pi. With the one script install, I mean, you can have your club members bring a Raspberry Pi. You could build it right there on site. Actually, even download the image and get it up and running, and install the updates. Get it up to date, and within another 5 to 10 minutes, have Node-RED up and running and going. Right. It is the key to Node-RED in the shack is to have it going all the time. And the only way you can do that is whenever you dedicate a resource for Node-RED. And a Raspberry Pi is a great way to just dedicate a resource to that program, right? We've got 2 in the contest station, and we run them 24/7, right? Now, there are ways and things that you can do to prolong the life of the Raspberry Pi, because we all know that it runs on an SD card, and eventually that SD card, gives way. So there are ways that you can harden the Raspberry Pi and run it on a USB port or a USB stick, and we've done that before, and that works. But yeah, Raspberry Pi is the way to go. I'm all for it.
Yeah, and as I think you said, I understand as well. They're made in the UK still, most of them, I think, and they actually they're becoming in a bit more frequent supply. We were able to get them from a Raspberry Pi shop actually, which is in Cambridge. So you can certainly get one-offs that way anyway. So this is a great use for one of those things. One thing that makes me a little bit nervous though, if you've got a transceiver connected to or a transmitter, and you're giving over control with a TX to a computer, how stable is Node-RED and the Raspberry Pi, for example, in leaving it to control your computer for you? Your radio, sorry.
Yeah, well, you always have control of your radio, right? And it all depends on what you want Node-RED to do. Do you want it to control? You can just read information from your radio and not send it any commands, right? You could just put it in a passive mode or program nodes in a passive mode and just read the information, and it just displays on the dashboard and have no control or no command of your radio. I'll tell you, I was turned on to Node-RED maybe 4 or 5 years ago by Mike Walker, VA3MW, and I remember having this conversation that we're having right now we invited him to a banquet, and he goes, "You got to look at this Node-RED stuff. It is really cool." And he told me about it, and I'm just like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with Node-RED like controlling my stuff. Like so I didn't mess around with it for probably 6 months. Then somebody showed me all the stuff it could do and showed me what it could do. And I was like, oh my God, I need to do this. This is awesome. And this is cutting edge stuff in the ham shack. You wouldn't believe that it is, but it is. Like, people aren't doing this. And we're porting it over to ham radio. I was actually talking to Tim, the creator, about what we're doing. And he his floor or his mouth hit the floor. And he's just like, I had no idea that you could control ham radio equipment with an IoT program. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're doing. He's like, he was blown away. So it all depends on, it's in your control. Whatever you want to give control to, your radio or your Node-RED system, that's what Node-RED is all about. You can, download a flow, and if it sends more commands than what you're comfortable with, delete those nodes that send the commands, or rewrite the program and say, you know what, I just want, my station to turn on and off, and that's all I want it to do. And you have control over it. It's not, and people always ask me, well, how stable it is. Does it ever go awry? Does it ever lose its mind? I've been running it for 5+ years. It's never lost its mind. Now, it's locked up before, and it's gotten to the point where I'm just like, something's going on. I got to, reboot this Pi. But I've never figured out if it was actually the Pi or if it was Node-RED. But I mean, that has happened once.
And there's never been a computer that hasn't crashed or restarted or frozen or something at some point. So it's very reliable then.
It's extremely reliable. And keep in mind, people are using Node-RED in process control automations. Like, if you take a look at some of the forums, a lot of like small microbreweries are using Node-RED to control the brewing process, right? Or they've got a mom and pop shop that they're doing stuff with, and they've got an automation, and they've bought a PLC, and the license for the PLC is $4,000, and they're like, well, I'm not going to buy this, and they buy a $35 Raspberry Pi, and they put Node-RED on it, and they just save themselves $3,970, right?
So just because it's free, and I believe it is free, isn't it, to download and use, don't dismiss it as being something not serious and not reliable. It is good.
Right. That Opto Video, they use it on their Groove IO PLCs, which are very I don't know anything about. I mean, I know Alan Bradley and SCADA nodes and Delta V and some other Siemens stuff that I used to program way back in the day, long time ago. But I only did that for a couple of months. Then I moved on. But they've got this Groove IO, which is a low-cost PLC, and they are totally Node-RED based. And I think a lot of microbreweries over here in the United States use them to control the process.
You've really wetted the juices here, because Neil Bowers has said, okay, I'm a convert controlling a brewery. So I think not just your ham shack, but maybe a microbrewery at home. Going back on Mark G6DDX's question now, I'll read it to you again because it's a little while ago when we read it. I've been playing with Node-RED and am plotting sent and received spots on a world map. Plotting, that was. But wonder, is there a way to overlay a full locator grid so it's easier to see where the spots are? You asked, do you mean something like Maidenhead, I believe? And he has said yes. So that is what he means. Yeah,
so there are, I don't know how, let me, world map Node-RED. I'm on another screen here. And I believe that the world map node uses, oh my gosh, here we go. Shape files. Hang on. There is a standard that this world map uses, and you can overlay basically anything. If you type in world map Node-RED at the bottom of their basically homepage that shows you different overlays, it will basically show you the JavaScript that you can add new KML or image overlays, longitude and latitude, radar stuff. All of that stuff is in examples in the world map web page. It's I just typed in world map info, and at the bottom it has all of that information. And I'm trying to remember what that standard is. It was like it'll come to me here in a minute. It's a standard for displaying maps, shape, leaflet. That's what it's called, leaflet. So do some research on leaflet, and you'll find that there is a whole stack of information on how to do overlays within that world map. I hope that answers the question.
I'm sure it does, Mark. Hope that helps you. And final question, I think, really, because I know you have other commitments to do as well, Carl. Tony M0TDK says, what is a PLC in this context? Is this the programmable logic controllers boxes that I remember from industry? Yep, you got it. So basically, just for Tony, could you explain, it's like a box with things like relays and controllers in them and a micro, yeah? Yeah. It is just a box that controls automation. It's an automation box, and it turns variable speed drives on and off. It turns gives power to different things, starts and stops conveyor belts,
does a whole bunch of things. And we used it. I worked at the time, I think that they're probably still the largest brewer in the world. And you can imagine whenever you brew just out of St. Louis 15 million barrels of beer a year, there's a lot of automation that goes in there. And I helped do that for a couple of months until I moved on to another position within the plant. So,
yeah, okay. Well, I hope that helps. And by the way, Mark's come back as well and said thank you very much. And that's thanks very much from all of us as well, Kyle. It's been fascinating. When we were first introduced to it a few months ago, it sounded like a really good language. You've elaborated on that now and shown us the sort of thing we can do. And along with the experience that some of us are gaining at the club meetings with the Raspberry Pi, I'm sure this is a great application for it. So thank you very, very much. I know you're a busy man. You're an IT manager in a hospital, so you're a very busy man. And it's very, very good of you to spend the time to be with us today. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you, David. Thanks to all the club members. And hope to work you on the bands, maybe 10 meters across the pond.
That'd be lovely. Maybe on one of those end-fed half waves that I mentioned earlier.
Exactly, yes.
You never know. Get a plug in there for that. Thanks very much, Kyle. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There we are. And thanks again to Kyle, AA0Z, for joining us tonight. I hope that's elaborated what we touched on a little while ago with Node-RED. Let us know if you, so that we can share it with other club members. If you're using Node-RED and if you get to using it with a Raspberry Pi or anything else really, because I'm sure everybody would love to hear. But that's it for this NARC Live now. So just a quick look again at what's coming this week at NARC. On Sunday, we've got the GB2RS News at 7 o'clock on GB3NB. On Monday night, also on GB3NB, we've got the Monday Night Net at 7:30. And at 8 o'clock, the 80 metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And then a week's time, next Wednesday, the 31st of May, we're meeting at CNS for a social informal and also a Raspberry Pi jam session. And we've got another use for it there as well. And by the way, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be back here on NARC Live when we're going to have a talk on low band receiving antennas. And don't forget to keep your stories and pictures and everything coming to us as well. We'd love to hear what you're doing and share it with other members. And also that mystery object, do you know what that was? I'm going to be very careful. Yeah, okay. Be very careful how I spend my got engaged. Thank you very much for all your feedback and everything. And of course, I look forward to seeing a lot of you at Radioactive.
Yep.
But until next time, from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7ERP, take care of yourselves, look after each other. Bye-bye.